"Hey, you there." The man in the janitor uniform at the back. "Come up here now." Madison Clark's voice cut through the Ryman auditorium like a blade of ice. 500 guests turned their heads at once, while on the live stream, millions of viewers were locked in the moment. Ethan Miller, 32 years old, stood frozen near the wings, his hands shaking, yellow rubber gloves still clinging to his fingers. Proof he had been scrubbing the stage just minutes earlier. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I did not think that. Do not make excuses." Madison snapped before he could finish. She strode forward, seized Ethan by the shoulder, and dragged him beneath the lights, hauling him to the center of the stage as if placing an object on display. "Let everyone see," she said sweetly, "whether you can actually sing, or whether you are just taking up space here." Then she turned sharply toward the band and snapped her fingers with practiced authority. "Play higher ground for him." She curved her lips into a knowing smirk. "That impossibly high note, the one that earned me millions." And just as the band prepared to begin, Madison leaned close to Ethan, her own microphone muted while his remained live. Her voice dropped into a whisper that still carried across the room and through every screen. "Fail quietly, kid." The air itself seemed to stop. The hall held its breath, as if glass were about to shatter. Ethan stood under lights blazing like fire, hundreds of eyes in front of him and a world behind him judging through screens. What he did next would not only defy Madison Clark, it threatened to unravel everything she had built on lies. But to understand why this moment mattered, the clock had to be turned back 4 hours earlier, to a time when Ethan was still invisible to everyone. But fate, Ethan Miller had not always been a man who cleaned floors. 5 years earlier, he had been one of the brightest contenders on Voice of Tomorrow, the hit talent competition where Madison herself sat as a judge. Ethan carried a rare high tenor, a range stretching effortlessly from low warmth to piercing heights. But what stunned professionals was not the span. It was the way he moved between registers. Chest ahead as smoothly as water flowing downhill, so seamless listeners could not detect the shift. Everyone believed Ethan would go far. Some whispered he was the season's ace. The night of the finale arrived, lights blazing, dreams within reach. When his phone vibrated backstage, on the line was the hospital. His wife Anna had been rushed in with acute pneumonia, critical condition. Ethan stood motionless. Ahead of him were cameras and millions of viewers. Behind him was the woman he loved. He did not hesitate, did not ask permission, did not explain. He left the show that night and ran to the hospital. The public turned on him instantly. Irresponsible, unprofessional, throwing away the chance of a lifetime. Then Madison Clark appeared on television and delivered a single sentence that sealed every door. "Anyone who does not respect an opportunity does not deserve a dream." 3 days later, Anna died. Their daughter Sophie was born prematurely at 32 weeks. Weighing barely 1.5 kilos, with a hole in her heart, Ethan was quietly blacklisted. Labels would not sign him. Stages would not invite him for 5 years. Ethan survived as a janitor. He and Sophie lived in East Nashville in an aging 2-bedroom apartment where heat worked in only one room. He worked 2 shifts a day, mornings cleaning the Ryman Auditorium, nights washing dishes on Broadway, sleeping less than 4 hours. Sophie needed heart surgery, $85,000. Insurance covered less than half. Ethan needed $45,000 within 2 weeks. He did not allow himself to think about failure. There was one thing: Ethan never surrendered. He still sang every night. He sang Sophie to sleep. "You Are My Sunshine," Anna's favorite song, always softly, carefully, as if louder notes might cause memories to collapse on him. Sophie often whispered that her daddy's voice made her heart feel better. Even nurses noticed her heart rate steady whenever he sang. No one could explain it, but Ethan knew it was not technique or miracle. It was love that evening. Madison Clark hosted a gala called Voices for Hope at the Ryman Auditorium, publicly, framed as a fundraiser for Vanderbilt Children's Hospital and its congenital heart program. The very condition Sophie suffered from? Ethan was on the evening shift cleaning backstage. He knew the money raised could save his daughter's life. 500 tickets at $500 each. $250,000 before. Donations even began. Madison stepped onto the stage beneath a perfect spotlight, smiling confidently, declaring that she would sing higher ground, boasting that the final C6 note had never been reached by anyone but her. That was why she stood there, why she could help these children. Applause thundered from the balcony. Ethan glanced at the massive screen showing children with heart disease. Among them Sophie, whose image he had consented to share during rehearsal. Ethan was wiping glass when Madison entered to warm up. The band played the opening chords. Her voice filled the lower range with control and polish. Exactly what one expected. But when the melody climbed toward the climax, Ethan sensed strain. Her neck tightened, shoulders lifted. When she reached for C6, her voice cracked at a sharp 5, nearly a tone and a half short. She cleared her throat, muttered about dryness, then ordered the technician to raise the backing track. The second attempt sounded flawless. Too flawless. Ethan froze, his ears trained through years of study. He heard the metallic sheen of digital sound, how the note floated above the harmony instead of blending into it. That note did not come from Madison Clark. It came from the speakers. Memories flooded back. Madison's words from years earlier. Anyone who does not respect an opportunity does not deserve a dream. The same woman was cheating. Ethan returned to the janitor room wrestling with doubt. Who would believe a cleaner over a singer with millions of albums sold? Then he thought of Sophie, watching the live stream, believing this woman was good, believing this gala helped children like her. Ethan searched his phone, digging into Madison's past galas. He found a small article barely noticed. Only 15% of funds reached the hospital. The rest labeled administrative expenses, production costs, marketing for Madison's brand. Something ignited in Ethan's chest. Not rage, but resolve. A man who had lost his wife, raising a sick child alone, standing in a cold janitor room deciding enough. The gala began at 7. 500 people filled the seats. Millions watched online. Ethan finished his shift, put away his tools, prepared to leave, then stopped at the wings as Madison appeared in a shimmering gown. Flawless under the lights, ladies and gentlemen. Madison said with practiced emotion, "Tonight is about hope, about giving these children a chance to fight." Applause roared. Cameras swept to the screen. Sophie's face appeared again. Madison promised every ticket and dollar would go directly to help these little hearts. Ethan stared at his daughter's image and knew he could not let the lie continue another second. Madison sang 3 songs. Polished and professional, good but ordinary. Then she introduced Higher Ground, calling it proof that belief could reach unimaginable heights. The band began. As the song climbed, the perfect C6 rang out, clean and effortless. But it was not human. It was artificial, digitized. Ethan stepped from the shadows without plan or script. Just a man silent for 5 years, choosing courage. Madison saw him immediately, recognition flashing in her narrowed eyes. A cold smile spread. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "we have a special guest." Lights snapped on, heads turned, camera zoomed. Ethan stood in his janitor uniform, yellow gloves still on, a cloth over his shoulder. "Ethan Miller," Madison said. "Some of you remember him from Voice of Tomorrow. A true talent. A true potential." She paused, letting the words sting, until he walked away before the finale. The crowd murmured. "My wife was dying," Ethan said, his voice carrying only to the nearest rows. Madison ignored it. "And now look at him," she said lightly. "Cleaning up after successful people. How touching." A few cold laughs rippled. Blood rushed to Ethan's face, but he did not tremble. He had endured far worse. "Come up here, Ethan," Madison said. "Sing for us." Every instinct screamed to leave, to run back to Sophie. But if he turned away, Madison would win. She would keep lying, keep profiting from children with broken hearts. One day, Sophie would watch this and think her father was a coward. Ethan stepped onto the stage, each step heavy, the lights burning. Madison handed him the microphone and smiled. "Make yourself comfortable. Just do your best." Before the band could play a single note, Ethan lifted the microphone and spoke. "Miss Clark, I have a question." Madison raised an eyebrow. "Oh, go ahead." "Could you turn off the backing track?" The air shifted instantly. Madison smiled, but her eyes hardened. "The track is part of the arrangement, Ethan. But during rehearsal, you sang without it," Ethan replied calmly. His words carried clearly through the speakers. "You sang alone." Murmurs spread like a ripple through water. "Soundcheck is different from a performance," Madison said, her jaw tightening. "Then could you sing first?" Ethan continued. "Just you, no track, so I can understand how you do it." 3 seconds of absolute silence followed. Then Madison laughed sharply. "You want me to audition in front of you?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I just want to know if you can actually sing." Gasps erupted. Nervous laughter bounced off the walls. Madison stared at him as if struck. "Of course I can sing," she said through clenched teeth. "I have been doing this for 15 years. Then prove it," Ethan replied. Madison spun towards the sound technician and snapped. "Turn it off, all of it." The technician hesitated. "Do it," she barked. The button was pressed, and suddenly the music was bare, exposed. Nowhere to hide, Madison raised the microphone and began. Her voice filled the auditorium, strong and controlled, years of training shaping every phrase. The audience slowly relaxed. Maybe the janitor was wrong. She moved through the opening lines with confidence. Breath measured, tone polished. But as the melody climbed, something shifted. Her neck tightened, shoulders lifted. The notes grew heavier. The bridge arrived. The climb toward the infamous note. D5, then E5, then F5. The sound remained, but the ease was gone. When she reached for C6, her voice shattered, breaking at a sharp 5, splintering like glass. Madison stopped abruptly, cleared her throat, and smiled thinly. "Sorry, my throat is dry," she said lightly. Taking a sip of water, "That is why people use tracks to protect their voices during long shows," she added, attempting to regain control. "But the damage was done. You cannot sing it," Ethan said quietly. Madison spun on him, her smile now sharp and brittle. "I said my voice is tired, but on your album, you sing it 27 times. Ethan replied, louder now, I counted. "And in every live performance video, you hit it perfectly." Phones rose across the auditorium. Whispers turned frantic. "What are you implying?" Madison snapped. "I have perfect pitch," Ethan said steadily. "The note on your album is C6 at 1046 Hz. What you just sang was 932, a sharp 5. A voice shouted from the crowd. "Is he right?" Madison's face flushed, and the voice on the album, Ethan continued, "does not sound like yours. It belongs to another woman. I checked the credits. Autumn Hayes, additional vocals." The theater erupted. Journalists typed furiously. Cameras abandoned fixed angles. Madison strode toward Ethan. "Shut up," she hissed. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because I am telling the truth. You do not know what you are talking about." Madison snapped. "I know what I heard in rehearsal," Ethan said, turning to the cameras. "And I know what I hear now. That note is not yours. You have been lip-syncing for 15 years. Madison grabbed his arm, not painfully but firmly. "It is over," she said coldly. "Actually, he is right," a voice called from the wings. The entire hall snapped toward Daniel Reed, Madison's sound engineer, stepping into the light, pale but resolute. "I have been her engineer for 5 years," he said. "At every show I played that track. She has never sung that note live. Not once." Silence crashed down. Madison stared at him in disbelief. "You are fired," she whispered. "I know," Daniel replied. But he is a single father raising a sick child alone, and he has been braver than I have ever been. The crowd sat frozen. Madison snapped back. Ridiculous. You expect people to believe a janitor over me. I have Grammys, millions of albums. Then sing it. Someone shouted. Madison's color drained. I already sang it. No, you cracked. Another voice replied. We heard it. The tide turned audibly. Madison looked at Ethan with something dark twisting inside her. Fine, she said coldly. Then you sing. No warm-up. No excuses. Ethan's hands trembled. This was the edge between truth and ruin. From the seats, a steady voice rang out. You have got this, Ethan. He turned to see Raymond Harris, the 60-year-old janitor who had worked the Ryman for decades. Standing and clapping slowly. Sing like you sing for Sophie. Ethan closed his eyes, drew a deep breath, felt air fill his lungs, memory settling into muscle and bone. He nodded to the band. Play Higher Ground, no track. The music began again, but everything was different. Ethan's opening lines were gentle, restrained, grounded. He focused on the story, not the spotlight. The pre-chorus arrived and his voice opened, power rising without strain. There was honesty in it, raw and unpolished. Something Madison's perfection lacked. He was not performing, he was testifying. The melody climbed. D5, then E5, then F5. His voice followed effortlessly. The bridge came. Ethan transitioned from chest to head voice seamlessly. G5, then F5, then B5. The audience leaned forward instinctively. Then he reached C6. The note rang out pure and clear. No tricks, no strain. Held for 4 seconds like a crystal bell. Gasps echoed, but Ethan pushed higher. D6, then E6, then F6. A range Madison's track never dared reach. His face remained calm, serene. Then he descended smoothly back through the registers, every transition flawless. He completed the bridge and entered the final chorus fully open. Fearless, when the last note faded, no one moved. Then the theater exploded, 500 people on their feet. Shouting, crying, the band clapping, Raymond jumping with both arms raised. The live stream surged, shares multiplying by the second. Ethan stood stunned beneath the lights. Madison looked as if the ground had vanished beneath her. From the front row, Yolanda Price, an R&B legend, stood with tears streaming. That is the best thing I have ever heard, she said. You did not just hit that note, you owned it. Applause roared louder. Producer Marcus Hill stood next, shaking his head. I have been in this industry 30 years. And tonight a janitor sang a note the woman who made it famous cannot. Silence fell heavy. Marcus continued. I mixed that album. That voice was not Madison's. It was Autumn Hayes. Madison opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. I stayed silent, Marcus said, because that is what this industry does. But I am done protecting lies. The hall erupted again. Madison screamed that everyone used tracks. Yolanda fired back that no one claimed to sing live while lying. Madison turned to Ethan, fear naked in her eyes. You will regret this, she whispered, threatening his family, the threat caught by every microphone. But Ethan felt free. I do not work in this industry, he replied calmly. I sing because I love it. And you cannot take that from me. The applause rose again. Madison looked around at the wreckage and walked off stage. Chaos followed instantly. Phones lit up, trending tags exploded. Madison Clark exposed. Ethan remained standing amid the storm, not victorious. Just certain backstage the chaos lingered. Security clearing the hall, Ethan sat on a folding chair. Raymond beside him, whispers everywhere. His phone vibrated. Sophie's voice came through. Daddy, I saw it. You were beautiful. His throat tightened. I am okay, sweetheart. The nurses said you were amazing. Hours passed. The hall emptied. Then a woman in an expensive suit approached. Olivia Grant, Madison's lawyer. Polite smile sharp as glass. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I am here to resolve a misunderstanding." Raymond stepped closer protectively. "There is no misunderstanding," Ethan said evenly. "Your client lied. Olivia placed papers on the table. Sign this and everything goes away. Scholarships, money, even Sophie's surgery covered." Ethan read silently, then set it down. "This says I lied," he said. "I did not if you refuse," Olivia replied coldly. "There will be lawsuits, stories, pressure. Your family will drown in costs." Ethan stood. "I understand you are threatening me," he said, "but I will not sign." Olivia's smile vanished. "Then I will see you in court," she said, and left. Ray and Ethan stood side by side in silence. "Are you sure?" Ray asked. "I am sure," Ethan said. "I will not teach my daughter that truth is for sale." And as they walked into the cold night, Ethan knew the hardest part was only beginning. The next morning arrived without mercy. Ethan woke to his phone buzzing like a trapped insect. The screen flooded with notifications, thousands stacking faster than he could clear them. He opened social media and felt his stomach drop as the first image filled the display. A photo of his apartment building in East Nashville. Peeling paint, broken gate, overflowing trash. The caption sneered that this was where Ethan Miller lived while accusing Madison Clark, implying desperation, and envy. Post after post followed. Screenshots of old assistance records twisted into proof of greed. Comments dripping with contempt, calling him ungrateful, saying people like him should know their place. Messages from unknown numbers poured in. Some mocking, some threatening, all relentless. By midday, news sites echoed the same narrative almost word for word. Sources close to the situation claimed Ethan planned everything as an extortion scheme. By afternoon, Madison Clark's legal team filed a $10 million defamation lawsuit, not only against Ethan but against Daniel Reed, Autumn Hayes, and Marcus Hill. The intent was obvious. Not justice, but intimidation. The documents arrived by courier. Heavy in Ethan's trembling hands, he understood immediately this was not meant to be won. It was meant to crush. The campaign escalated with cruel precision. By early evening, new articles appeared, alleging alcohol issues, family instability, fabricated illness. One outlet even claimed Sophie did not have a heart condition at all, that it was staged. Ethan sat on the worn sofa staring as lies stacked like wet cement. The walls closing in, fear pressing on his chest. Then at 7:15 something shifted. A video appeared online, posted by Autumn Hayes herself. She sat in a professional studio, gold records lining the wall behind her. "My name is Autumn Hayes," she said steadily. "I am the studio singer whose voice Madison Clark has sold as her own for 15 years. Ethan's heart pounded. Autumn explained how she sang the whistle notes in Higher Ground and other songs, paid modestly and bound by strict silence. She held contracts to the camera, proof undeniable. She admitted fear had kept her quiet, but watching a janitor being destroyed for telling the truth broke something in her. The video spread like wildfire. Within an hour, millions had watched. By morning, several other studio singers came forward with similar stories. Contracts, recordings, emails, public opinion flipped violently. Madison Clark, exposed, surged to the top of trending lists, backed by evidence, not rumor. Ethan watched from his sofa as the narrative cracked and fell away. Madison did not retreat quietly. Her team doubled down, expanding lawsuits, dragging institutions into court, the Ryman Auditorium, the singers, anyone connected. $10 million each. Illegal carpet bombing meant to scare silence into place. Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table, gripping someone's pages, his mind forced into clarity. Survival required reason, not panic. His phone rang. "An unfamiliar number, Mr. Miller," the woman said. "My name is Laura Simmons. I am an attorney. My firm would like to represent you pro bono." Ethan straightened. "Why?" Because what you did was right, she replied. And the law should not be a weapon for the wealthy to silence truth. She was honest. The case was strong, but long and exhausting. Ethan looked at the papers spread before him. Then at Sophie's drawings taped to the wall. "All right," he said quietly. "Let us do it." Within hours, Laura filled the table with files, explaining countersuits, fraud, false advertising, class action, turning Madison's weapon back on itself. For the first time since the gala, Ethan felt direction. That night at 4 a.m, Sophie woke gasping. Her lips tinged blue. Alarm sounded. Nurses rushed in. Doctors spoke quickly. Heart failure risk. Emergency stabilization. Ethan stood useless as machines hummed. After hours, Dr. Walsh pulled him aside. Sophie's heart was weakening faster than expected. Surgery could not wait. Maybe a week. Ethan sat alone in the waiting room as dawn crept in. His phone heavy in his hand. Olivia Grant's number still there. One call could end the nightmare. Money for surgery, peace. His finger hovered. Then the door opened softly. Sophie shuffled out, dragging her 4-pole. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are you okay?" He knelt and held her gently. "I am okay, sweetheart." She leaned against him. "Why are people saying bad things about you?" Ethan swallowed. "Because sometimes, when you tell the truth, people get angry." "The lying is bad," she said simply. He nodded. "Then why do grown-ups lie so much?" "Because being brave is hard," he replied. Sophie looked up with eyes like her mother's. "Are you scared?" "Very," Ethan admitted. "But you still do it?" She asked. "Yes." "Then that is brave," she said. "Mom told me bravery means being scared, but doing right anyway." In that moment, Ethan knew he could not make the call. He could not teach her that truth was negotiable. The preliminary hearing came quickly. A small courtroom, limited seating. Reporters lining the walls. Madison Clark arrived composed. Surrounded by expensive suits, Ethan sat between Laura and Raymond Harris. Wearing his only dress shirt, the judge, Patricia Donovan, listened intently as arguments unfolded. Laura presented unedited footage from the gala. Madison dragging Ethan on stage. The whispered threat, the cracked note. The courtroom absorbed it in silence. Autumn Hayes testified. Contracts displayed. Recordings played, the evidence clear. When asked if Ethan was right, Autumn answered simply yes. Judge Donovan turned to Madison and asked one question. Could she sing the note? The room held its breath. Madison faltered, citing warm-up excuses. The judge pressed. Madison fell silent. The gavel struck. The injunction denied. Sanctions imposed for frivolous litigation. The judge affirmed Ethan's right to speak the truth. Outside cameras swarmed. Ethan answered simply that he could finally breathe. That night, a major investigative program aired the story to millions. Sponsors withdrew. Labels cut ties. Madison Clark's empire collapsed publicly. But Ethan's focus remained fixed on one thing. So for 3 days later, his phone rang early. A representative calling on behalf of a renowned musician, offering to cover Sophie's entire medical costs. Ethan broke down crying. Then more calls followed, support pouring in. Donations raised rapidly by strangers moved by the story. The morning of surgery, Ethan sat beside Sophie's bed. She squeezed his hand. "Sing for me, Daddy," he sang softly as they wheeled her away. The hours crawled, fear and prayer blending into one. When Dr. Walsh emerged smiling, Ethan collapsed in relief. The surgery successful. Sophie would live. When she woke later, she whispered that his singing made her heart feel better. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt his own heart lighten. The fight was not over, but the reason for fighting lay safe before him. Breathing steadily, alive. The months that followed moved with a strange mixture of speed and stillness. The legal battle unfolded steadily while life demanded patience. Lawyer Simmons guided the case with calm precision. Motions filed, evidence organized, witnesses protected. Madison Clark's lawsuits began to collapse one by one under scrutiny. Judges saw the pattern clearly: intimidation dressed as litigation. Several claims were dismissed outright. Others consolidated into a growing class action, brought by ticket holders who had paid for live performances that were not live at Alice. The cases progressed, more voices emerged. Studio singers who had lived in shadows for years finally stepped forward. Not just women, but men as well, all carrying contracts filled with silence clauses, all sharing nearly identical stories. Ethan watched from the sidelines as something far larger than him took shape. An industry reckoning that could no longer be contained or dismissed as rumor. Public opinion hardened into resolve. Lawmakers took notice. Consumer advocacy groups amplified the issue. Hearings were scheduled. Transparency in live performance became a headline topic. Ethan was invited to speak not as a singer, but as a witness. A father who had simply told the truth when it mattered most. He declined most appearances, choosing instead to spend his time at the hospital with Sophie. During recovery, Sophie healed slowly but steadily. Color returned to her cheeks, strength to her steps. She practiced walking the hospital halls like a racetrack, dragging her four-stand proudly. Nurses smiled when Ethan sang quietly beside her bed in the evenings. His voice softer now but freer, no longer trapped by grief. Something inside him had unlocked one afternoon. A representative from an independent artist-owned label reached out. Not with promises of fame, but with understanding. The founders were parents themselves. They spoke first about schedules and family before contracts and charts. Ethan listened carefully. When he agreed, it was with conditions: full ownership of his voice, flexibility to put Sophie first, and a commitment to use whatever platform came for something larger than himself. The agreement was unlike anything the industry had seen. Modest advances, transparent terms, shared control. A portion of all revenue earmarked for a fund Ethan proposed. A program to support young singers from working-class families, providing training, legal education, and protection from exploitative contracts. They called it Unbreakable Voices. The name felt right. Recording began quietly. No grand studio unveilings, just long, honest sessions. Ethan worked closely with Autumn Hayes. The two shared an unspoken understanding forged through years of silence and courage. The songs they wrote were not about revenge. They were about reclaiming breath, about speaking when fear tells you to stay quiet. The album took shape slowly, deliberately. Every note intentional. When Silent No More was released, it found its audience immediately. Not through heavy promotion, but through resonance. People heard themselves in the songs. The album climbed charts steadily, then quickly. Within weeks, it reached gold status, not because of spectacle, but because it was real. Music videos were filmed in meaningful places. The East Nashville church where Ethan once sang with Anna, the empty stage of the Ryman at dawn, the hospital room where Sophie had learned to breathe easier as momentum grew. Change followed swiftly. State legislatures introduced bills requiring clear disclosure of pre-recorded vocals in live performances. Consumer fraud statutes were applied where deception was proven. Industry organizations revised crediting rules. Vague labels vanished, every contributing vocalist named openly. Streaming platforms updated song pages to include full credits. Names long hidden finally visible. A union for studio singers formed almost overnight, membership swelling rapidly. Autumn Hayes found herself no longer a secret, but a celebrated artist in her own right. Her solo work received critical acclaim. When she accepted an award, she spoke simply about fear and courage, about how one ordinary man had reminded her that silence is not safety. Madison Clark's fall was quieter by comparison, but complete. Bankruptcy filings, settlements totaling millions returned to ticket buyers. Awards rescinded after formal review. Attempted comebacks fizzled without support. Eventually, she faded from headlines, not erased but diminished. a cautionary figure rather than an icon. The industry moved on without her. 18 months after the gala, Ethan stood backstage at the Ryman Auditorium once again. The same walls, the same faint smell of polish and wood, but everything else was different. He was no longer there to clean floors. He was there to sing. Sophie, now 8 years old, sat in the front row, healthy and bright. The thin silver scar on her chest, a quiet testament to battles already won. Before stepping on stage, Ethan stopped by the custodial room. Raymond Harris stood there with a mop, smiling. "You did it, kid," Raymond said, clapping a hand on Ethan's shoulder, not as a mentor or hero, but as an equal. Ethan shook his head gently. "We did," he replied. Everyone who was ever told their voice did not matter. The auditorium filled with people unlike the gala crowd of the past. Teachers, nurses, janitors, single parents. Families who had lined up early. Not wealth but work filled the seats. Ethan walked onto the stage to steady applause. Sophie beamed from the front row, wearing a shirt that read, "My dad's voice saved me." He opened with silent "No more." His voice imperfect but alive. Traces of years lost, still audible. And that was what made it powerful. For the second song, he invited Autumn Hayes onto the stage. Together they sang Higher Ground. When they reached the final high note, both voices rose clear and true, unmistakably human. The room erupted. For the final song, Ethan called Sophie up beside him. "This is my daughter," he said simply. "2 years ago, I almost lost her. In that fear, I found my voice again, not for fame or money, but for love." They sang "You Are My Sunshine" together, her small voice steady and unafraid. The audience stood weeping and cheering as one. As the last note faded, Ethan looked out at the crowd, at Raymond and the custodial staff standing proudly, at people who had once felt invisible now seen. And he spoke without pretense to everyone who was ever told to stay silent. "You are not invisible anymore." Thunderous applause filled the hall, not for perfection, but for truth. The applause did not fade quickly. It rolled through the auditorium like a living thing, rising and falling in waves. Ethan stood still, letting it pass through him, not absorbing it as praise, but recognizing it as release. People were not clapping for a performance. They were clapping for themselves, for every moment they had swallowed truth to survive. When the curtain finally fell, the room buzzed with quiet conversations and tearful embraces. People lingered as if afraid to step back into ordinary life. Backstage, Sophie ran into Ethan's arms laughing, her strength unmistakable. Raymond watched from a distance, smiling to himself. The man who once mopped beside Ethan, now watching him walk freely into a future neither of them could have imagined. The weeks after the concert brought a different rhythm. Not frantic or fearful, but steady and grounded. Unbreakable voices received applications from across the country. Teenagers and adults alike writing about singing in basements, garages, church choirs, kitchens after long shifts. Ethan read every letter himself late at night, seeing reflections of his own past in countless variations. The fund grew not through massive donations, but through consistency. 15% of every ticket, every stream, every album sale flowed into it automatically. Transparent and public. Lawyers volunteered time. Vocal coaches offered sessions. Contracts were reviewed before signatures were ever placed. Young artists learned early that talent did not require silence to survive. Sophie returned to school full-time. Her classmates, curious about the scar she wore proudly. She told them it was where doctors fixed her heart, and where her dad learned how brave he really was. Teachers noticed how she sang during recess without hesitation, no longer softly but clearly. Her voice carried without fear. Ethan continued to refuse most industry invitations. He chose carefully where to speak, when to sing. Each decision filtered through one question: does this protect what matters? His home became quieter. Evenings filled with homework at the kitchen table and shared meals that felt like miracles after years of survival mode. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a state assembly office, informing Ethan that new legislation had passed requiring full disclosure of pre-recorded vocals at live performances. It had been nicknamed informally after him. He read it twice, set it down, and said nothing. Change did not need applause. The Recording Academy followed with updated rules. Awards now required full vocal credits. Studio singers finally named openly, not buried in fine print. Autumn Hayes called Ethan the day the announcement went public. Laughing through tears, "We are visible now," she said. He replied simply, "You always were." Harper Clark's name surfaced occasionally in articles about the past. Bankruptcy proceedings, canceled tours, retracted honors. But Ethan no longer followed those stories. They felt distant, irrelevant. Her fall was never his goal. Accountability was. And that chapter had closed on a quiet Sunday morning. Ethan and Sophie visited the small cemetery where Anna was buried. They brought flowers and sat on the grass. Sophie talked about school and friends, about singing on stage, about wanting to help other kids someday. Ethan listened, feeling no sharp pain this time. Only presence. He sang softly there, "You are my sunshine." Not out of grief, but gratitude. The song no longer carried weight. It floated. A reminder of love that had not ended, but changed shape. That evening, Ethan received a message from a man who worked night shifts cleaning office buildings in Ohio. He wrote that he sang alone while mopping floors. That watching Ethan made him feel seen for the first time. Ethan replied personally, thanking him for trusting his voice, even when no one listened. More messages followed like that. From warehouse workers, nurses, delivery drivers. People who had been told their dreams were impractical, childish, unworthy. Ethan answered as many as he could. Never with promises, but with honesty. Your voice matters even if no one applauds it. 2 years passed quietly. Not marked by headlines, but by routines. Unbreakable voices supported hundreds of singers. Some went on to careers. Others simply sang more freely, and that was enough. Success was no longer measured by charts, but by courage. One evening, Sophie asked Ethan if he missed the janitor job. He thought for a moment and smiled. "I miss the people," he said, "not the silence." She nodded as if she understood completely. On the anniversary of the gala, Ethan returned once more to the Ryman. Not for a performance, but to watch from the balcony as a youth choir rehearsed. Many of them scholarship recipients, their voices uneven but fearless. He sat unseen listening. A sound filled the space where he had once been dragged into the light. He realized then that the moment that changed everything was never about exposing a singer or hitting a note. It was about refusing to disappear, about choosing truth when fear offered comfort. As he left the building, Raymond waved from across the hall. Still working, still steady. Ethan waved back, knowing some things did not need to change to remain meaningful. That night at home, Sophie fell asleep on the couch while Ethan hummed softly. Her breathing slow and even, he watched her chest rise and fall. Remembering nights filled with machines and panic. The contrast felt overwhelming. Ethan did not think of himself as brave. He thought of himself as consistent. He had chosen once and continued choosing the same thing over and over. Truth over safety, love over fear. Voice over silence. Outside, the city moved on. New stories replacing old ones. But somewhere a janitor sang alone on a late shift. A child listened. A studio singer spoke up. A listener felt less invisible, and that was how change truly happened. Not in one dramatic night, but in thousands of quiet decisions made by ordinary people who refused to stay silent. Ethan turned off the light and sat beside Sophie until sleep claimed him too. Content in a way he had never known before. His voice no longer something he hid or fought for, but something he lived with freely and without apology.